audience that do send in your Q&As, because that's coming up in a short while. If you do have any questions about anything that you'd like our experts to share, please post it on the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen on your right. Actually, it's on my right, so it's on your right as well. Okay, moving along to our next question. Countries, especially in Asia, are now reopening, and we hear a lot about green lane and the so-called travel bubble, government-to-government collaboration, allowing people from low-risk areas to travel freely, and that's in the hope to revive the economies. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, some cities in China, South Korea, and Japan as well. But then again, people are still reluctant to travel. So I guess when it comes to the business in the events industry, to help bring people back, that would be something we must really do. So I'd like to ask Andrew this first question. How can we as business in the event sector help bring people back?
Well, I'd love to be able to promote on a country's record around safety. That would be fantastic. But as we all know, things can change very quickly. I think most countries are concerned about second waves. But at the end of the day, how your country has managed the COVID crisis, I think, is on record and on show for the rest of the world to see. And so that will be a big influencer. I mean, look at our neighbours down here in New Zealand. Their economy is 100% opened up because they have no COVID cases at this point in time. So domestically, they're just business as usual. In Australia, I was just checking the numbers this morning. In total, we've had 7,285 cases of COVID-19. A majority of those have recovered. We've only got 422 active cases remaining and a total of 102 deaths. So we're on the cusp of moving from suppression to elimination along the lines of New Zealand. We just need that kind of 2 weeks of clear run for us to be in that position. Now, then there's a lot of challenges around process around travel and opening up of borders and those sorts of things. And I guess that then has to be worked through in terms of what we can and can't do. But the travel bubble with New Zealand is certainly on the cards here. Industry is being very positive and assertive around pushing an opportunity. One that I've just seen recently is a connection between Wellington and here in Canberra, which is being pushed for, I think, next month in July. But as I mentioned before, we still need to be aware that some of our states' borders are closed in terms of being protecting their residents, and it would make it very hard to open up a connection with New Zealand before those state borders are 100% opened up. So I think the record on managing COVID-19 is an absolute opportunity that can be used moving forward in a global environment.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, what would you say to help bring people back, and also how to creatively and effectively communicate to clients in the efforts that we've invested to have them back on incentive trips?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to dispute the fact that people are reluctant to travel, because we've just relaxed our movement control order here in Malaysia just recently, a few days back. And looking at some of the reports, they are saying that the demand for hotel accommodation for Q3 and Q4 this year is on the increase. So there is a steady demand signaling confidence in recovery. So people are not hesitant to travel, but I think the leisure travelers will come first. Second wave of, I wouldn't say wave, the second group of people who might travel would be the business travelers. So to bring them back, I think we need to encourage people who are already traveling to see what we are already doing to safeguard their interests. And that hopefully that will translate to a earlier confidence for them to return in terms of business events.
There was a comment here by one of our audience, Jackie Gorman. Australians are very keen to travel. And he says leisure will come back first and then business events. No matter what, well, people want to travel again. That's true. Our next question to Kun Benjamin. How can we set a calm and relaxing tone so that business and incentive travelers feel confident to make a trip again? And how are hotels and planners working together at this point to tailor events as Thailand is now entering its fourth phase in the easing of lockdown restrictions?
Yeah, similar to the other panelists, we're looking forward to hopefully the announcement in a few hours as to what next level of restrictions will be, and need to give credit to the government and all the municipalities in Thailand for the work that they've been able to do to control the situation and keep numbers down to a minimum, as well as, you know, the resumption of the normal economy or the next few stages. I think there's always a delicate balance. I know normally I'm very keen to rush and get everything done very, very quickly, but we need to have a measured approach to ensure that we're maintaining the confidence of the bookers, of the last and final end clients, as well as all of the people around that, because we need to give them that confidence that what we have done, what we've set up and what we've implemented is in place. And I think that's a mixture of a number of things. So it's all about going out there, and as everyone's indicated, everyone does want to travel a lot. So many people have missed that level of social interaction, and having operated through the period as well, we have seen quite a quick rebound. We've got a lot of business still on the books in our hotels. That is, the customers and the clients have kept on extending that pass, and as soon as they are able to travel, they certainly will. And domestically, we've definitely seen that with some of the more leisure-driven destinations picking up very, very quickly, as well as some of those leisure destinations, they're traveling into the large cities as well, because everyone's keen to try to resume back to more normal and social interacted scenarios as quick as possible.
The next question I'd like to ask Richard, the general feeling of clients in your market, what have they indicated? You know, they're interested to travel and to organize events. You know, when is that looking like? Is it going to happen as people expect in the final quarter of this year, or is it in fact going to happen in 2021 when it comes to incentive travel?
I think everybody is just holding their breath. A lot of my corporate clients are actually reluctant to start their live events and moving on to virtual. Simple reason being that they do not want to be the reason for another cluster to appear. So nobody is willing to put their name at stake for this purpose. So for me, I would think that live events will probably only happen towards the end of this year, through quarter four and quarter one of next year.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, what are your thoughts? What's the general feeling of clients in Australia?
I guess firstly, some of the government restrictions, we just keep in mind, we are still a little bit behind Thailand and Southeast Asia. And so it hasn't been long since we've just been allowed to, in some states, invite more than 5 people to your home. So we're a little bit further behind. But having said that, with a lot of the intrastate travel being allowed, I think everyone's been sick of their homes and just busted out and gone into regional areas and really enjoyed themselves. And that's been good for some of the regional tourism areas to get a bit of revenue through the system again. I think across the course of the next few weeks, and we're already seeing in some states, events of 100 or greater being allowed here. And so it's a softly intrastate kind of approach at this point in time. But we would see, you know, those things continue to be wound back. As I was talking before about getting a little bit more insight into the thinking of clients, and, you know, really keen to see some of the results of the polls. But we worked with Executive PA on a survey of some of their corporate event planners, and the response was quite overwhelming, really. 80% of the EAs and PAs in these corporates are planning for an event of 100 or more across the next 12 months, and I think about 40% within the next 3 to 4 months. So I just think while there's a lot of doom and gloom, there is a lot of optimism, I think, in our industry. We are an in-person industry, and we're very excited, but there is that balancing of getting together and the risks that need to be offset in holding those activities. I think whether you're a corporate or an association, part of your thinking at this point in time would be what are the risks that we're exposed to or exposing others to. As we've said before, the safety and hygiene practices are removing those risks from a physical event perspective, but there's also some other risks that need to be considered around, you know, insurance and you know, possible outbreaks, as Richard mentioned as well. So all of that's being weighed up at this point in time, but I do think there's an absolute enthusiasm for things to get back to some sort of normality. But I suspect that group numbers will be smaller in the short term.
So is there a restriction of the capacity of people who can join events in Australia? Did you mention 100?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's a little bit different from state to state. I think we've had some great announcements coming out of Western Australia recently. I could be slightly incorrect, but forgive me if I am. I believe it's events of up to 300. And they've reduced the square metre rule, which we had a 4 square metre rule here in Australia, down to 2 square metres, which is all movements in the right direction. But other states are yet to sort of catch up to that speed. So I think it was fantastic to see all states and territories work together in making decisions about how to prevent COVID-19 spreading across the country. But now that we're in the opening phase, I think there's a bit of, what would you call it, a bit of competition between various destinations in Australia, and they're wanting to see the economy open up, and I guess in turn that means that they no longer have to continue to support various industry sectors as well. So it works both ways.
What about the case for Thailand and Benjamin in terms of gathering?
Yeah, look, the restrictions, they're not as fragmented as maybe the states in Australia are, but there are still some differences between different provinces and different regions. So Phuket versus the city versus other areas. But I think what we are seeing is very similar to everybody else. The restrictions are going case by case. The government and the regulators are taking a very measured response, but they're also doing that with great levels of consultation with agencies such as TSEB, which has done an amazing job, and TICA and the associations. So to make sure that as we do it, we're doing it in a measured response to then support the rejuvenation of the economy, but then also make sure. So at the moment, restaurants can open, small meetings can take place, meetings up to 200 can take place, but there currently is the requirement that it's all from a singular company or from a single business unit. So hopefully some of those restrictions will soon ease, because there's a large amount of social elements, even things like weddings. I've got over 25 weddings that I've got some eager people to be able to undertake for the rest of the year. A lot have had to even push them back. So that social element, you can't have everyone from a wedding from a single organisation. So these are areas that I think will start to relax, but definitely, you know, further on in the year.
Let me read a comment here from our audience who believes that business will come back first due to the economic impacts that COVID-19 has caused globally. Business cannot stall anymore, or we then risk a global recession. There will be more risk mitigation at play, but we can already see governments arranging green lanes for business travelers and transits. From what I understand is that there'll be a discussion between Thailand and perhaps I think China and Japan on a possible travel bubble that can happen between our countries, especially from low risk areas. So that's a good sign. Hope we see some really positive results that can help encourage people to travel more and to even make incentive trips. All right, so moving on to our next question. We would like to dig right down into the customer's experience. They are to travel amidst the pandemic. So how different will the experience be now? How can we make it pleasurable as possible, at the same time keeping everybody safe? So I'd like to break it down to 4 main areas when it comes to stay, to dine, to meet, and play. I'd like each of you to take us to each stage of the client's experience. Kun Benjamin, would you care to start?
Look, I think the accommodation and amenities under the stay component, that's relatively straightforward. Again, we made significant changes with a lot of areas such as throw rugs, cushions, pillows that can't easily be cleaned for each turnover of rooms. So we have elevated aspects of the cleanliness, and we have had to change some certain parts of the amenities. Some items are single use. I'm really trying to avoid that at our property so that we don't go back to bad practices on single-use plastics, single-use papers and so forth. So there are, you know, plastic laminated or laminated items in the room that can easily be cleaned. So I think accommodation is quite straightforward, and the Accor All Safe program has some great protocols behind it. I think when we go through to dining, so we recently reopened our buffet about 2 weeks ago. We are running under restricted numbers with seating, with large seating allowances made in between seats and tables. So normally a restaurant that could take a few hundred now is limited to just under 100. But positively, and again, to speak to the signs of recovery, we're selling those lunches out every weekend, several days in advance. So that shows the hunger for people, no pun intended, to return back to dining experiences. I think everyone's a little bit over of takeaway delivery services. So I think restaurants will continue to do, and we have done that differently. So we call it a buffet, but there's a lot more handling, a lot more cooking on a la carte, a la mode sections. Our waiting staff and our kitchen team are cooking it fresh and then delivering it to the tables with all of the safety protocols. And again, in guidance with the Accor All Safe and Thailand's SHA requirements. Meetings and events, I think we've covered that off. There will be restrictions. Andrew mentioned guests per square meterage, whether it's 4 or 2 or 1 to 1.5 metre spacing in between seats. We took the time a few months ago to go through and run all of our floor plans with revised numbers. So, you know, in cabaret setup through theatre and classroom, boardroom style, how all of those new configurations. And with that in mind, that's why we are starting to get some great early indications of groups coming forward, because people can see what we've done, they can see the new floor plans, and they do have the confidence with our property and the Accor All Safe and the SHA protocols that have been placed down. I think the last one's most probably the most challenging, the play and the entertainment, because I think, you know, that's where there's a lot more interaction. There's a lot more human contact. So I think they're the elements. So things like team planning and team building, that might take some time to be able to understand how that can evolve. You know, we've got a day spa in my hotel, how that's actually changing and moving forward, as well as social events, as we mentioned earlier, even a simple event that we've always held, you know, weddings up to 300-400 people, how we're going to change the way that weddings and engagement ceremonies are held in the hotel, which it's not entertainment and play, but it is a very social gathering where people are mingling. Cocktail parties, I'm the president of the Australian Thai Chamber of Commerce. We've got a monthly event that we hold where we usually have 300 or 400 people, business networking events. How we do that moving forward is definitely going to be a challenge. But again, it's something that we do need to return back, as some of the questions have been. We do need to try to restart the economy, because it definitely has been a challenging quarter.
Richard, please share your views.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about how the hotel is going to run, because Ben is the expert, so I'll leave that to him. But I will look at it as an organizer and how we can actually make it a bit more pleasurable for people to come back. So if I look at it, I would think enhancing room service menus, getting special menus for my guests, so that we can encourage them to dine in their room, seeing that now the capacity of your F&B outlets are now smaller, and we don't want them to go out of the hotel because that increases exposure. Instead of giving out your regular gift packs, we can give them branded masks or pocket sanitizers for them to use during their stay. So these are things that we can put into the rooms as a gift pack when they check in. In terms of the F&B outlets, my experience is when I go to F&B outlets right now, it looks very spaced out, very empty, definitely lacking in ambience. So I think there's a creative license for the hotel, or even for my events, to actually dress up, using this place to dress up with physical partitions that is decorated according to the themes. And this would definitely help to maintain social dynamics, energy and flow for the whole entire space. For the live events, I would think one of the main attractions of having a live event compared to a virtual one is that there's a lot of networking that's going to happen, and people miss that. So how do we encourage having all of this? is to actually create event space. Say, for example, if you have a large conference of 1,000 people and your plenary hall cannot fit that 1,000 people due to space constraint, then we have everyone into different breakout rooms, and using technology that we are using for virtual events, stream the plenary session to all 4 rooms at the same time. So what you are doing really is less crowd movement, less time wasted, and maximum usage of shrinking event space. Now, for entertainment and play, there are creative ways to encourage people, your guests, to adhere to social distancing efforts. I have some pictures that I would like to share with you on how that is. Give me a second, let me put that up.
Sure.
Oh, okay, I have been disabled. Yeah, the sharing has been disabled. So it doesn't matter, but what I'm saying is that for social distancing ideas, as an event organizer, we can actually creatively engage our guests when they come for the event. For example, doing tic-tac-toe kind of a flooring to space people out when they are doing their registration, for example. Creatively doing decorations in the space to create the distance for people. But still give them that celebratory kind of a feel to the event. So yeah, oh, okay, now I'm allowed to share the picture.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah, so you can see from this, I like especially this, where they wear the large Mexican hat to keep the social distancing. So it's kind of fun, and it creates a lot of engagement with people. You can even play games with the huge hat, I suppose. Yeah,
Seems
so
fun.
that's how I would look at it. All right. Yeah, I will unshare now.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Andrew, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, look, as Ben mentioned, I think the accommodation side seems relatively straightforward, but I think there's opportunity for the most to be done there. I think, as Richard even mentioned, the concept of in-room services, and not that the guest has never been the centre of attention, but I think there'll be more personalisation that takes place there, or opportunity for personalisation from an accommodation perspective. And given the circumstances that, you know, we're coming out of our shells, coming out of restrictions, there needs to be consideration that the guests may be needing to spend more time in their room, perhaps than they would have otherwise. Typically, when I've attended a conference before, the room was the least amount of usage that I had at the venue, and most of it was the external activities. But I think there needs to be a bit more consideration about perhaps work being done from the room, consideration around minibars. I don't think minibars in Australia are as lavish as those in Thailand, but I think that's something that might open up over time as well. Look, from a meeting and possibly even a dining perspective, using my old operations hat, I really do think that there's going to have to be a lot of creativity, as we just saw from those images, which I thought were quite great, around how do you convert a large space, which otherwise would have accompanied a lot of people, and move that into a space that can only probably accompany 50% of the attendees that otherwise would have been there. What do you do with that space in between around social distancing, and how do you make the room look attractive, let alone the physical logistics around people movement and those sorts of things? So I think there's possibly a bit more creativity that will occur in the floor layouts of you know, dining rooms and banquets and seating for meetings. But what that looks like, I'm not sure. I'm not the absolute creative, but whether that means venues are working more with external parties to think around that creative design, or otherwise do that in-house, I'm not too sure. But I think they're areas that will change in the near future. But also, I guess we've been talking about virtual quite a bit. It's been around for a long time, but never more than now, as per this webinar even. And I think it's now becoming an essential part of running a meeting, where future events, international conventions, will simply have this as part of their basic offering moving forward. And that reluctance in the past perhaps to go virtual may become just normal moving forward. The good side of that is the potential for obviously increasing audiences and moving away from that fear that by having a virtual element will mean you'll have less delegates. So I think will really open up to this being a compulsory part. The bit that we probably don't have our minds around is, as far as international meetings go, is the different time zones. I mean, I'm already attending a conference in July that's taking place in the US with a virtual component, and essentially at 9 a.m. there, I think it starts at 10 p.m. here. So there'll be some of those considerations that need to be made, but I think virtual will become just part and parcel of running a global meeting moving forward.